Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm Lizzy Muhammad Park, your host of the show. Today's episode is going to be absolutely fantastic. It's our first one after convention, which feels like forever ago. But as we welcome fall, we also welcome a brand new board member, Kingsley Martin, everyone. Welcome to the show, Kingsley.
Hi, you said, yeah. Hey, thank you for the welcome. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. I
Yes,
was
and
making
you
sure I was a board member and that I wasn't a boring member. That's what I was trying to make
no,
sure.
no, definitely not. Definitely not a boring member
Get
at
get your
all.
pillow out. It's time to nap.
No, listen, we are going to get them energized and ready to go. I mean, listen, he's an actor. If you were able to tune into the talent show this summer, you heard his, some of his work. He's a director, a producer, and a podcaster. We are really going to get to, know you better today. So, outside of the intro that I just gave, you are from Texas. That's correct.
Yep, Texas. Everything's bigger here. Things bigger.
And it's bigger and better. Well, we would know that. We were just, for a convention, we were there. So there
There
you
you go.
have it. um, could you tell us a little bit
Everybody
about
had to wear a
your
cowboy hat in order to be in Texas. There was just
mine was
3,000 blind
missing.
people with big, 10-gallon hats and
Don't forget the
spurs. It was
boots.
weird. It was weird. Everybody was wearing spurs. Everybody had to ride on a horse to get to each.
All
It was
throughout the
wild.
hotel.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Well, listen, we were all in Texas this summer for convention. We saw you there at the talent show. And we just want to get to know you a little bit better. Could you share with us a bit about your NFB story? The Texas affiliate is very strong. So I mean, did you find the NFB because of the convention this summer, or were you already a part of the Texas affiliate, or
My NFB story is actually really short, believe it or not.
oh,
Um, so I'm by city here in Texas, so I'm part in Austin and part in Houston. I have a business in Houston, and then I work here as uh, as an assistive technology instructor, as well as doing media related projects as well. So um, in Austin, the person who's my roommate here in Austin, she joined the board for the Austin chapter of the NFB, and I met the president of that group. His name is Jonathan Franks, and I decided to kind of participate as a company because I have a company called Access Today, and to support them as sort of a sponsor. So I've sponsored an activity for them with the Ronald McDonald House and things like that. But um, the short answer is I kind of became a part of that NFB chapter, and I think that was April or May of this year. And everybody was talking about convention. Here comes convention. It's going to be in Houston. I'm like, well, I live in Houston. I know how that works. So I went to convention, not expecting to find anything related to the performing arts, believe it or not. And then I was looking through this, very healthy book of all the activities going on, and it said performing arts division. It's like, well, that sounds like fun. I'll go and check that out. I didn't know there was such a group. I was looking for like podcasters and all kinds of things. What other kind of divisions do we have in here? Like, so I came across the performing arts division and went into the meeting, and I, they had I think I want to say her name was it Lexi or something was the lady of the name who was the board member, or Lacey? I hate to not remember her name, but
Leslie?
Leslie. Thank you. And I should remember that was the first girl I ever had a crush on was a girl named Leslie. But anyway, not this Leslie, but a Leslie. Anyways, so bad for me. But so she was stepping down, and they had a vacancy, and three or other four, qualified people, and then me decided to try and see if we could be seated. and I paid him off, and I won. So there you
And we are
go.
so glad to have you. Wow. So in this respect with the this theme of the performing arts, not the performing arts division at this time, but listen, you got involved from a very young age. You were 9 years old when you had your first acting gig, I believe, which I don't think was paid. I think it was a was it school or community theater? It's escaping me at the moment. But could you share a bit about your original interest when you were just, there, and on the dirt roads of Texas and you heard
I
about
was a
this?
captive. I was a captive actor. So
Really?
I was like, it was like dance for your dinner, boy. But
Oh
no, it was
no.
no, it was. I was in private school, and it was just around November, and the teacher said, "So our class is going to do the Christmas play." She didn't sound like that. She kind of sounded like I make her sound like a witch, but she was like a, "Yeah, we're gonna do the Christmas play cast." It was I don't know who it was, but it was Judy Andrews or something. But anyways, she said, "We're going to do the Christmas play, and you're going to play this role, and you're going to play this role, and you're going to help with this, and you're going to do this." And I ended up being a character named Mr. Sportsman. It was called Santa's Workshop, and Santa was retiring, and he was going to sell the workshop, and I was one of the people who was going to buy it, and I was going to turn it into a sports resort, apparently. And That's how I got started. And it was, I mean, and what's really, I guess I reflect on now and don't ever recall feeling it was I didn't really feel any anxiety about like, oh my God, I'm going to be on a stage or something. I think I just was like, okay, and then and then got up there and we did the play and it was just such a great experience. It was obviously life changing for me because I got to see all these parents, administrators, other kids, and they were just smiling up a storm and having fun and laughing, probably at our silliness more than anything else. And then afterwards, I was just hooked. Everybody was like, "Oh, that was so good," and they seemed so happy, and people were hugging their kids and going, "You were so good," and it just so much joy. It was like a joy fest. It was almost like it was just a back a big massive audience of joy. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good way to spend your life is doing something fun. I'm sure I wasn't thinking, well, now I'm going to be the Joy King or something, but I decided that I wanted to be a part of that, and just never let go after that.
That's a really just beautiful start to a passion. You know what I mean? Which is why I love that question of asking people how they became interested in their performing arts. So now, because this is a performing arts podcast about accessibility and blindness, did blindness change your performing art in any way? Did it affect the way people reacted towards you or the way you reacted to trying the performing art itself?
It did, but not in the stages at which I was in the early part of my acting. So I'm an '80s kid. I grew up in the '80s, and the the first play I did didn't make any difference whatsoever. Santa's Workshop, and then I moved to a public elementary school and did stuff there. And I didn't have any problems when I did the first two plays in elementary school. And then the year after that, I went to what's called middle school now. And by the time I got there, I was like, well, I've done three plays, and I don't want to brag or anything, but I mean, I should probably be the lead. Just saying, because I got so much experience. And I met a theater teacher. We had these little kind of 6 week, um, excursions into different things we could do. We're gonna do Spanish, and we're gonna do theater, we're gonna do art, and so we had 6 weeks at a time of those. And I did 6 weeks in theater and still loved it, and then wanted to be in their play, and so I went up and auditioned for their play, and of course it was sixth, seventh, and eighth grade at that school, and I was like, I was like, well, I'm gonna audition for this part, and then the theater teacher came back and said, well, there was no part that I could give you in the play, but there was this two-line role that I was gonna cut out, but you seem like you wanna act so much and want to be on stage so much that I'll let you do this two-line role if you want to do it. And I'm like, 2 lines? You don't know anything, lady. I'm the master of theater. I'm the joy king or whatever. I was just really more of an egotistical little, snot. And so I went home and cried all night about not getting to do that, getting to play, getting to play the role I wanted to play, which was a detective, and then I went back the next day and said, "Can I play the role, please, a little role?" And so she let me play that little two-line role, and I got to walk out on stage and say, "Are you Phyllis Hollow?" And she goes, "Yeah," and I go, "I got," and I get shot down. So that was the that was most of my that was most of my sixth grade year of acting. And then I did some other things. But as far as did sight stand in my way? Not that when sight really started to stand in the way of me doing anything or my sight challenges, because I was probably what you'd call a mid-level partial at the time. I was
Hmm.
in school throughout high school. Really, when that started to change was when I started going into the pro level of things. Because even when I went into community theater, I didn't have as much of a challenge with it. They still let me do all the things crazy things I had to do within the play and all that stuff like that. They didn't. I don't remember ever them saying, "Well, we don't think you can do this." Now, maybe if it was singing, they probably wouldn't have wanted me to do it because that's my greatest disability of all. Is trying to say they're like that is that I'm definitely in remedial class when it comes to singing. But anyway, but anyways, but not as far as the acting. When it really became a bigger issue was when I started working on projects that had cameras and lights. And it wasn't because I wasn't cautious, but it was because people were concerned. Oh, well, there's the guy's going to trip over the lights or whatever else. Or people thought because your eyes look so different because I have glaucoma is one of the things I
Hmm.
have, and it causes kind of a blurring of the eyes, like a hazing of the eyes, like a grayish bluish
Hmm.
hazing. And so most of the time when I got into doing, low budget film and such, I was always playing the bad guy. I always played the bad guy because they thought, oh, he's a bad guy, freaky looking eye guy, not necessarily saying it's one way or another, kids, but many of the people I knew that were low budget filmmakers partake of an extra special cigarette back in the day, and so they would go, man, guys are freaky, dude. And so I would always
There
be
you
that
go.
guy that would play that they would think was the bad guy or the mysterious character or whatever else like that. So that was really where it affected me the most, not because they wouldn't cast. Well, sometimes I did get one director one time that said he would not cast a person who was, by his definition, blind in a major role because he says, hey,
Mm.
I'm not going to do that, which also tore me apart when I was younger. But for the for the most part, I just was conditioned to play bad characters, the bad guys or something like that, or supporting characters. So.
Interesting. I never thought of that people would say, oh, I have an idea. That's fascinating. You know what I mean? I think all of our listeners will have a different opinion on this. It's probably going to be quite a polarizing thing. So people say like, oh, but you're a typecast. That's not fair. And other people will say, well, you had a guaranteed role. So I think, that no matter where people fall on that thought, it's fascinating. And at the end of the day, you were able to get a role and get more acting experience. So I wonder if there's a difference between, the independent film scene and, Hollywood. I mean, I guess it's probably pretty obvious with the number of, major blind actors that we have in Hollywood these days, overwhelming numbers. No, not at all. So, so,
So there's Stevie Wonder,
right. What a great actor he is, right?
Al Pacino. Oh wait, that wasn't real, was it? Okay, sorry. Jamie
Yeah.
Foxx.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so yeah, I don't know, but I find that really fascinating because that's not something that I have ever heard of or thought people would think of. That's very creative, which I think is something that's kind of cool about the indie film scene.
So indie film, when you get into the lower budget films, everybody wants to make something that they can sell, and
Hmm.
everybody thinks it's something that they can sell. When they're like, I have the most new idea that's never been done in the history of movie making. And someone got to a bunch of independent filmmakers and said, "Don't tell anybody what you're doing because they'll steal it." Now I don't know why they're going to steal it while you're shooting it. It would take them; they would have to move pretty quickly to do it. But most of them want to sell projects, and they're hoping that their movie will be their Quentin Tarantino ticket into the world of Hollywood. And so as a result of it, while they want to take risks, they don't want to take risks that they think might be misconceived by, the world of
Ah,
entertainment. So they're going to be cautious about when they're going to take chances. So that's one of the biggest, and that's something that perhaps we'll talk about later. But one of my biggest challenges with independent film and really just in Hollywood and media in general, whether you want to call it, Hollywood or, big time or
right.
whatever you want to call it, is there are so many places where you can cast people that are non-conventional that you don't have to go in and say, well, I have to write the script and now say it's a person in a wheelchair, or it's a
Hmm.
person who's deaf, or
Hmm.
it's a blind person. There's so many times when you could do things that wouldn't require you to do that. Why is it that you have to go, well, we have to write that there's a special blind character in here, or that there's a special,
Right.
person in a wheelchair. Maybe they just exist in society. They do exist. It's not like we're leprechauns that disappear when the lights come on or something. It's like
Right,
I turn the
right,
lights on, all the blind people are gone.
right, right.
You know, but unfortunately, there's a fear. As much as that's why so much of media rehashes things that have been done before, and but somehow in that whole process, you don't see a revolution of the average person you see in society. Now, as bizarre as that might sound for people, there are literally hundreds of millions of people with, quote unquote, disabilities in the world. So it is not a small percentage of the population. It's a notable percentage of the population. Now, if you live in, a town with 3,000 people, maybe you don't see that. But when you get
Right.
into the big cities, you have entire institutes that are called the community center for the blind, or it's all these
Right.
things. But I
Yeah.
guess the bottom line, I guess, sort of trying to get back on track what you're talking about. I've worked on the low budget films where that was something, and most of the time for me, what happened was just because I was always out there putting myself out there and auditioning, that eventually, people became more interested in what they thought I could what they thought I was capable of doing, and they saw what I was capable of doing and my commitment to them, because I became more than, even though I was an actor, it wasn't like that was where I stopped. Like I said, well, if you need help with anything, let me know. So I mean, I would work on the crew and be a support system for them, and so I was kind of around it all the time, and so people looked at me differently because I became a part of their team and was willing to do more than just, the whole concept of, where's my trailer and all that kind of stuff like that. Which in low budget film, you don't get a trailer, you get a folding chair and hope it's hope it's not raining outside or freezing or 112 degrees. But you became a part of that, and so they opened their perceptions opened about what you were capable of because they saw you putting in the effort to do more than just be an actor, or but to be part of the whole system. But anyway, so working on low budget film, that's what happened. And then fortunately I was able to graduate up, and I did do, some SAG projects as well. One of the last big project that I worked on was a film called Hoboken Hollow, and it was one of Dennis Hopper's last movies. And it had
Mhm.
Dennis Hopper and C. Thomas Howell and Sean Connery's son Jason Connery, and oh gosh, Lynn Shay from Something About Mary. So it had a bunch of people on. So it was a multi-million-dollar project, and it was really this is a really bizarre side story, but I actually was cast as a character who, in real, it was based on a true story or inspired by a true
Right.
story, and the guy was actually the guy I actually played, who actually was sight impaired within the movie, what was really funny is he had one eye that was closed because of whatever his condition was. I didn't really look too much into his history, but
Mm-hmm.
so they brought me in and castered my head and all kinds of stuff so they could put this one little eyepiece over me to make my eye look like his did. And they were doing the first shot that I was involved with, and they were like, you know what, Kingsley, doesn't work. We're just going to use the eye that you have because I had one eye that was just kind of caved in, and because of a botched surgery and stuff. But it worked, and that was the thing they were always the most concerned about was how are you going to navigate on set? Well, first off, if you're really truly deeply sight impaired and you don't have any sight, then you're using a cane. It's not like you're just, kind of just going, I'm going to see what's here and just kind of trip over lights and sandbags and all that kind of stuff. You're
Right.
more, it's usually people who are, who take for granted what they have that end up hurting themselves because they do things they're not cautious. They trip over, they'll trip over things. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen people do that. And, I've never done it because either I've walked very cautiously to make sure what was around me, or if I needed to use my hands, or if I had a cane or whatever at the time, because I don't normally use a cane, but
Mm-hmm.
if I needed to use a cane, I would use a cane. So I think it's, I guess my whole point was is I I I think that people, it's still part of the misnomer of, oh well, how are they going to be able to get around, and can they hit marks, which are places on the floor where you have to step when you're shooting anything this
Right.
media and a camera. There's a place you have to step, you have to go from this place to this place, and you have to hit that mark so that you're in the frame of the camera, especially if they're doing
Exactly.
like a close-up shot. But that's not hard because that's something you can learn how
Mm-hmm.
many steps does it take, whatever the case may be, what's around you. If you have some sight, you can use some markers. If you don't have any sight, it's just about knowing the rhythm to move to the mark. But people don't take those, especially when it comes to sighted people. You do see sight challenged people, you do see that misnomer that, oh well, can they do that, do I need to be more cautious? All you have to do is give them a chance. But I do think that low budget is a great place to put yourself in if you're a sight impaired person, because then you can um, not only become a part of the acting side if that's what you really want to do, but also learn the behind the scenes aspects, because then you aren't just someone who's like, I don't know what's going on out there because I'm just here in front of the camera. Once you know what's going on behind the camera, it's a little easier to work within it to try and make it work for you, if you have a sight challenge of some kind.
I totally agree with you. And one of the biggest takeaways that I got from what you just said is that it's sort of up to you, to an extent, the way that people view you. At least in the scenarios that you've been in, you seem to be very confident and self-assured and knowing what you're capable of doing. So it wasn't even a question, to just jump right in and start helping out with the crew. I don't know that a lot of people would do that, sighted or blind. I think a lot of people are just like, especially these days, just very shy. The reason why I said I say these days because you just think about how people don't really look each other in the eye anymore. You know what I mean? They don't really talk to each other. It's everything's behind a screen. Everything's on the phone. Which I know makes me sound like a total granny. Because I often I
No,
often complain about these things. Just because the more social aspects of let me jump in and help you. I think that the world is becoming more shy just because we're not used to connecting with each other in a very direct sense. So it is one of those things where it seems to me that, when you just jump right in and say, hey, this needs to be done and I can do that. You know what I mean? I like that approach, and I think that that's something that our listeners should 100% take away from this episode. When you see something, and this applies to acting, this applies to anything. If you see that something needs to be done, and you know that you can do it, do it. You know what I mean? What better way to show people what you're
or
capable
maybe it's
of?
better if you don't know you can do it, you should still try, because what happens if you don't ever try something? You'll never know if you can do it.
That is
That is
true.
the other thing. It's the biggest challenge is people talk themselves out of being a candidate of something. They're like, well, they'll never, it's kind of the lottery, the old lottery thing. I mean,
Hmm.
there's 256 million possible combinations in order to win the lottery, right? But if you
Mm,
don't ever play the lottery, you'll never win the lottery. I'm not
it's true.
encouraging people to go out and buy a lottery ticket, but the point still stands is, there's what, 7, 8 billion people on the planet. That means that if it's 250 million combinations for the lottery, that's what there's 1 in 32 chance, there's a
It could
one in
be you.
32 chance of that 256 million possibility. You have to buy 256 million worth of lottery tickets, but I'm just saying there's no chance if you don't play, and
Yeah.
so but it's the same thing with this. With any career you want to do, you're exactly right. It doesn't have to be performing. It really should be with anything you do in life. You've got to try, because if you don't, you'll never know if you can do it. People go, I mean, my mother is intimidated by technology, so it's like, oh, it's just too much to do, and then the voice drives me crazy or whatever else. But well, yeah, it drives you crazy, and this is for anybody. It drives you crazy with, like, sometimes with JAWS or whatever, until you become comfortable as it being a part of it. Just like with
Right.
descriptive audio. Like if you watch a movie that has descriptive audio, of course, descriptive audio is distracting if you've watched them without it before, but it's just adapting to it. And then you start to realize, oh, wait, now I know something that I didn't know happened before in that movie or
Hmm.
whatever. But when work, you should always try something. And if it's not working the way that they're doing it, see if there's a way you can, you don't have to do it everybody else's way. That's one of the things that I
Right.
think happens to us as, people and performers. I've especially seen that is they feel like, well, I want to, and I know I did this when I was younger.
Hmm.
I wanted to do it like everybody else, but I can't do it
Hmm.
like everybody else, quote unquote. I've got
Hmm.
to do it my way because this is why I don't sing, because I'm not going to try and do Frank Sinatra. Plus, you don't have the copyright clearance. But anyways, but you've got to do it your way. So you've got to find a way that works for you and be inventive and don't be intimidated by it. That's why, that's why people really should, anything that you are interested in, at least start reading up on it and studying it, because then you already are establishing a knowledge which other people may not know because they don't read.
Hmm.
So read, and that's the first step for anything.
Now, what about the people who are afraid of looking bad? You know, I want to help with crew. I'm not sure if I can do it. People out there might be thinking right now, our listeners might be thinking, well, what if I try it and then I drop something or something goes wrong? Then they're really gonna, put me in a corner, so to speak. You know what I mean? And they're gonna think that I'm less capable even than I already am. You know what I mean? What happens then? What do you how do you tackle something like that?
Well, I think the first thing we do is just uh, find a place you need help. I'm not You find a place where you can help, or
Hmm.
at least observe and say, can I watch you guys, what you guys were
Yeah.
doing? I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm not, and you may not be able to see what they're doing, but you can get a lot of information by hearing people and hearing
Hmm.
how they move around and things like that, and then asking questions. If you're sitting there kind of observing, and you go to the DP and he says, you say, so how do what's the camera look like? And he might let you see what the camera looks like, and what the tripod he's using looks like, because no tripod is the same. There are bigger, bulkier tripods. There's, steady cam where the cameraman's walking around carrying the camera. There's cranes, gimbals. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But if you observe
Right.
things, you start to learn about it. And don't start with things maybe where you have to carry around equipment. Say, do something where maybe you're an assistant you're asked to be an assistant to someone, and
Hmm.
in costuming, and maybe you're helping in wardrobe and saying, and you say, can I help in wardrobe? And they, okay, well, so go grab this costume, and it's looks like this pair of shorts or something. Be an assistant. Don't be afraid to be an assistant. If you're looking to try and jump into a key role, that doesn't happen. Here's a really funny story that's got nothing to do with me, but I remember listening to Frank Mancuso Jr., who is the guy who was really big with the Friday the 13th films. But he
Right.
started in part two as a PA. He was just a PA. And
Mm.
then there was all these people in the crew, and this happens a lot in low budget because nobody's getting paid. People will
Right.
drop out for different reasons. And as he talked about in his, because it was a low budget movie, even though they had some money, he said he just kept growing up the food chain because he stuck around. And by the time it was all over, he was he went on to produce Species and a number of other movies and became a very successful producer and produced a huge number of the Friday the 13th film series. So and even the TV series version of it. But he didn't don't I guess the point is don't try to start in a like a key behind the scenes role. Try and start in a supporting role where you can help and you can learn something and learn about the process of it, because as you learn about it you will become more knowledgeable, and you never know when the day will come. If you've been working, it's sometimes hard to imagine, but imagine you work behind the scenes on a couple of low budget films and learn about cameras or learn about sound or whatever else, and then one day someone's going to come to you and say, "Hey, what is that audio device?" Oh, well, it's an H6N. That's what we record sound on, and they're losing lavalier mics. What's a lavalier mic? A lavalier mic is something that you put on someone's shirt or something like that so that we could pick up their audio instead of having to run a boom over them. What's a boom mic? So, but you pick those things up over time. So,
Right.
but you've got to be willing to start at the you got to start at the bottom before you can't just start at the top, because no one starts at the top. You always start somewhere.
So I've heard you say, do your research and set yourself up for success. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And, once you've done that, people will know. They'll get to know you. They'll get to, you will become more confident over time. And am I getting it right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say, I thought I heard you. I thought you were gonna chime
I
in.
was I was
Yeah.
attempting to breathe. Sorry.
Oh. No. Yeah, no, but once people get to know you, they will know what you're capable of, what you are capable of. You will know what you're capable of, and that will help to increase your confidence. And I think that's just fantastic advice for our listeners. On this theme of confidence, you were paid over $500 at age 17 to say one line in a
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah.
I find that absolutely just awesome. You know what I mean? If I was 17, $500 for one line, that's amazing. So, we definitely want to hear about this story, but really what I want to know is what gave you the confidence? I mean, was this just like a fixed price that they were going to pay you? Did you negotiate for that? What gave you the confidence? Because I think people will sometimes feel like they're not worth it. We talked about money on the show before. I think too often people count themselves out. And so, what gave you the confidence at that age to say, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it.
So, what's called an open casting call. They were doing open casting for something, and I will say this too. This leads into this whole thing about the $500 line. So I do want to make this something that people should be aware of, especially if you're wanting to be an actor. So many people think if you want to be an actor, you've got to go get an agent. Well, the truth be told is, unless you're working in a larger market like Los Angeles or New York, there are not a lot of you know agents that are local in in Austin or Texas or the state of Texas or Pennsylvania or Arkansas or whatever, that work with people who usually have some kind of a challenge, what a fine motor, hearing, or sight. They don't have a lot of agents that are specialized in that area. They do have those kinds of agents in New York and California. There are agents specifically that work with that special crew of talent. But that's why open calls are so important to get on. Look for open call boards online, search on Google auditions, whatever city you're in, see if you can find posting boards, and then go to those auditions. Now, you may, depending on where you're at, you may run into people who are not open to you doing something because you have a sight challenge or because you have some kind of a physical challenge or whatever. But you've got to be willing to take the hits, because everybody takes a hit. I mean, what was his name? What's his name? Is his name Lenny Williams or something? Leonardo DiCaprio had to change his name for years because they didn't like his name. They said, you'll never make it with that name, kid. I mean, they'll they'll tell you that all kinds of things. George Burns, his real name wasn't even George Burns. I mean, there are so many people who don't even have that same name because they're like, your name doesn't work. So they're going to tell you the same thing about they may tell you the same thing about whatever the circumstances is of
Right.
your physicality. But go to open auditions, and eventually people are like, hey, I know that guy. I saw him over this at this other thing. And sometimes you'll be in an open audition where you're in a theater and you're surrounded by a bunch of other people and you're all auditioning on a stage in front of each other, and you never know who might see you and go, man, I thought you were so good. I thought you had a really good, way about you, and I think you'd be great. I wanted to do, I want to do this play, and I'd like you to do this play with me. Or would you be willing to do a video scene with me? You know, every opportunity. If you really love acting, this is something I really like to get across to people. If you really love acting, then act because that's what you want to do, not because you want to become famous. Because fame
Mm,
has no has is there's no survival. There's no major survival rate in fame. Look how many actors have come and gone over the
right.
years that are not notable anymore. So perform because you love to perform. And that was what sent me to open auditions and eventually sent me to that commercial. And I just auditioned and, I mean, I wasn't I wasn't playing the role of a person with a side issue in it. They had me, decked out in a Hawaiian shirt and I think it was a purple baseball cap and pair of sunglasses and some the fingerless gloves, and I'm sitting in an airport with this guy supposedly, and I'm playing a Game Boy or something, and he's playing this little pocket casino game, and I say something to him, and he goes, I go, oh no, I look at his game and I go, Radical, dude, and he goes, no, Radica, because that was the name of the casino game. That was it, and it was. It didn't even air in the market where I lived. I think it aired in Las Vegas or something like that because they were trying to get people ready to play casino games. This was in the late 90s. And
Right.
so but it happened, and it was a company that had some money behind them because they were, those commercials are sponsored. The company pays them to make a commercial about their product so that they can, try and get people interested in it. And so they figured in one incarnation was this weird looking guy who played a Game Boy thinking that their console game was cooler than a Game Boy. So
Hmm.
that was that was it. And it was fun, and it was and to show you how low budget it is, I brought my own clothes. I had my own clothes. They told me to bring wacky looking clothes with me, and they would just pick what I was going to wear. And so I carried a suitcase over to the airport and had all these clothes, and they said, "Okay, you do this, yeah." And then someone put their shades on me. Said, "Oh, there, put the shades on." Oh, yeah, there you go. That was it. That was it.
Great. So now we all know that you owned a purple hat back in the 90s.
Oh, I owned all kinds of things back in the 90s.
I bet, I bet. So this is you when, you know, you'd been acting for, since age 9, at that point.
And I was
You,
17 at that point. Yeah, like you
yeah,
said
yeah, I was
earlier.
gonna
Yeah.
say, yeah, yeah. So you had already been acting for what's that, like 8 years. So it makes sense how you got into directing and producing, given your philosophy of trying new things and jumping right in. But I'd like to delve more into that side of your career, the directing and producing side of things for stage, and I believe you've done it for film as well. Could you just tell us about um first of all, what that even means? I don't think I really know any other blind directors um for stage and film, but also if there are any adaptive techniques that you use to be successful in these areas.
Well, first I would say that the very first thing I directed on the stage was probably the single worst thing that you could ever have watched in history of watching things. I wrote a play that was called The Coffee Kings. It was based off of a local coffee shop, and I was totally ill prepared for everything on the day that we're supposed to be doing this play, and it was like a one act play series. And so we didn't have the phone, and I'm supposed to be answering a phone. I had people who weren't paying attention and didn't hear their cues. So I'm trying to. That was a great chance to learn improv because I had to improv hyperventilating on stage, although it was probably more method acting at that point from concern of the actor not coming on stage. So, but I wanted to do something where I could play a different character than most of the stuff I played, which was obviously usually most notably it was bad guy characters. I was almost always playing the heel in a show, and so I created that, wrote that play, and then that was really the only real play that I did that I recall right now. But then I started working behind the scenes with one of my better friends. He was doing a movie, and I worked on behind the scenes on his. And then I just decided I co-wrote a script with a gentleman, and decided to try and shoot it. And we were shooting it on, DV, which was, kind of in the trend at the time. That's when, the Blair Witch had come out and it had become successful, and so we decided to do our own thing. And it was a chance to play a different role than what I was getting the opportunity to play. And that was one of the things that I thought was the best is if you can write roles that people will not normally give you the opportunity to play, that's the greatest thing. And a really funny thing now is we have chat GBT now. So either if you're inspired as a writer to write something, then write something and then perform it. But if you're like, I'm not a writer, then go to chat GBT and have it write something for you. And then you can always change it and edit it. Sometimes the thing people need the most is a starting point for them to write.
Mm.
Like I will always say that I'm definitely a better rewriter than I am an initial writer because it's just it I like to some for someone to give me a little skeleton that I can then, add the meat to and build it up into whatever it's going to end up being. Um, and if you either write something or get something to support you and start it, or meet a friend who wants to write, have them write something for you, but write the kinds of things that you want to try and do, or write the kind of stories you want to tell. You don't always have to, if you're trying to. That's one of the things that made Quentin Tarantino so distinctive is that he was not trying to do the same thing as everybody else was. And
Hmm.
because of it, it defined him as a director. That's what defined Kubrick. That's what defined a number of people. Yes, you're going to have, I mean, even Martin Scorsese, he's the same way. They don't tell stories the same way every other director does. And the same thing goes for people as performers. Write the roles that people would not normally put you in. You just happen to be blind, or you happen to be hearing challenged. That's the thing. The only one who's going to limit you to be able to play a certain role is you. If you think, well, they'll never be a blind lawyer. As a matter of fact, there are blind lawyers. As a matter of fact, one of the board is going to law school now to become a lawyer. So there absolutely is people who have that. So if you want to play a blind lawyer, why can't you play a blind lawyer? It's not like you can't stand up in a courtroom and do an opening and closing statement or question a witness. I mean, it's not as dramatic as they
Exactly.
make it look. You know what I mean? But
Right.
write those roles and allow yourself to play that. The only one who limits you is your imagination. So let your imagination grow and play different roles. That's why. So the film that I did, which was Faith and Bullets, the one that I actually was, you know, prepared for doing when we finally did it, was a film that was all about another actor and I. We wanted to play roles that we weren't getting, so we teamed up with a writer, had him write something, and then ultimately decided to end up shooting it and shot it and got to play a different role from what I normally play. Now I still played kind of the good guy, bad guy character, but I didn't play it in the conventional sense as I was just a hard character who was just pure evil. He was a tormented character by what he was going through and what was happening within his story. But that's where directing, and then you can also create things that people can see. I mean, as an actor, one of the challenges we face as performers that are in front of the camera or on the stage is we don't we create that world, but we don't define that story as much as a director or a writer does. So if you want to define that story, write a story. direct something, and then you're like, this is my card, and this is me saying, telling a story from my perspective. What it's like, it's really amazing with all the people who I have met that, there's so many. And when we went to this at the convention, there was 40 or something, people with sight challenges in that room. I just think if there was any way to get together, you know, 200 people who were all passionate about media in some ways. People who wanted to direct, people who understood cameras. There are cameras that have voiceover quality now. I think it's the A7 IV or something has a voiceover features to it now. It's Sony. Get those two guys together and make a film, and just it just happens to be people who are blind making a film. But it doesn't have to be defined as, oh, it's a blind people making a film. And if people want to use that to help promote it, fine, but it doesn't have to be what makes it memorable. Just make it something interesting and tell an interesting story.
I personally love that. Absolutely love it. Now, and I love the idea. We have to bring that to Caitlin. But when I think about directors as they look at actors on stage, in front of the camera, so on and so forth, people would assume that you have to be looking at the actors to know that they are doing things correctly. Are there any sort of adaptive techniques that directors can use, that blind directors, or even low vision directors can use to make the job easier?
Sure. You could have an assistant, like an assistant director, who helps you and tells you if, well, I saw a little mess up with, the camera caught part of the lighting, or it caught the microphone stand or something like that. Or if you can tell a lot by listening to people's voices too. If you can't see it, if you understand what you want from their performance as an actor, unless it's just there's no sound in the story, if you can describe to an actor what you want them to do to kind of get across this meaning. You can't just say, tell every actor, I want you to do it exactly this way. I wouldn't necessarily go the Woody Allen approach to things, because he's very particular about, he wants you to say lines with the uhs and the ands and everything exactly the way they are in the script. He's very meticulous about his dialogue, supposedly. But if you tell an actor what you want from the scene, and then have your assistant director present when you're offering this to them, and make sure it's someone you feel confident with. You may not get the first assistant, you may hire an assistant director or get someone to work with you who is an assistant director the first one may not be the perfect one. You may take some time and you may have to
Right.
find someone, but once you find someone who, it's a relationship of trust. As much as the cast actors have to trust you, and the crew has to trust you as well as a director, find that partner who can be a support system for you, who maybe doesn't want to direct, but they are very good. They have a very good eye for making sure that your vision is pulled off. And that's what assistant directors do, is they make sure whatever the director's trying to accomplish is done, and make sure they accomplish what they have to in a day based on the schedule. Because especially in low budget, you're working on such tight schedules. You're the same way in features, as in big features, but it's a partnership between the first assistant director and the director to make sure everything's pulled off. So find someone who you feel you can trust, and it may take a while, but you'll eventually find someone who you have a shorthand with, and you can say, so did he do that thing? No, he didn't do it. Okay, let's go ahead and do it again. And the assistant director helps pull that together, and then you can work with the talent. And see, here's the thing: some directors are not actor directors; they're purely technical directors. They couldn't care less what the actor's doing on camera, because they want to make sure that it visually looks the way they want to, or they
Mm,
they choose actors so they don't have to direct them, because they want
I
actors who
see.
instinctively, get what. That's why you always hear people talking about, well, I had a lunch with someone and we were talking about and seeing if they wanted to do the role. Well, lots of time it's because they're like, I like your instincts. You have a natural instinct for what I want to do with this. They talk about the script, and then they can say, okay, I can put my confidence in this actor, that they know what I want from this character and this performance, and now I can focus on the visual aspects of it and the audio or whatever to make sure it looks the way I want it to, while they're doing the thing I know I could count on them to do. It just depends on the kind of director you are. Some people don't want to direct because, like, how do I know it's good? it's good, acting, if I'm directing people to be a good actor. Well, that's where you building a group of people around you who you trust to give you their opinions. Now, everybody's going to have an opinion and you have to make the final choice, but you do have to have people that you feel like, it's like if you watched a movie with, Al Pacino, and you thought Al Pacino was fantastic in Serpico, and then the guy's like, yeah, I didn't believe him as Serpico. I didn't think this. Well, maybe you don't have the same beliefs, but they were like, yeah, I think he did good as Serpico, but I think he could have done this and this as well to improve it. And you go, oh, well, you just complimented me, so we agree on he's a good actor. But you also are saying, giving me suggestions that I haven't maybe thought about before. That's a good partnership. People who, offer you something that complements what you're already doing. So build a crew around you in general that does that, and it will take time, but that's why you get better. If you start thinking you're going to have to be perfect out of the gate, you'll never do anything. Start with just shooting a scene. Maybe just shoot a scene with something and just shoot it with your iPhone and have someone with you and just shoot a scene. You can edit up. You can shoot a scene on an iPhone now, and there are people who have shot feature-length films on an iPhone now, and
Wow.
there's so many ways to do it. You just have to be willing to go through the growing pains, not only to move up the ranks and understand how it works to make a media project with a camera or on a stage, but also, how to improve as a director every time. And when it comes to the stage, if you're sight impaired, you're working with your sight impaired talent on the stage, or you're working with someone who on the stage who's totally totally blind or whatever, that's where you can put down, tape on the floor that acts as a guide sometimes. And you'd be amazed how many actors can, tactually feel that, and they can follow it without having to have a cane or something like that. It just
Right.
it's just about, do you think inventively, and get a good group of people around you, and the stronger you all get as a unit, the stronger the work you create will be.
Speaking of a good group, I mean, a lot of people, casting directors, fellow producers and other actors, so on and so forth. What has the reaction been to having a blind director or a blind producer in a show? It seems like it's been positive, or is that just your personal outlook on the situation?
Well, most of the people, I mean, well, here's the one thing. I mean, I guess I was fortunate to connect with some great people and have them work on the team. I also paid them, so they were a lot of them were like, "Yeah, sure. Oh, just what are you gonna do? What do you want me to do? I'll pay. Are you gonna pay me? Okay, okay. Whatever you want me
Hmm.
to do." And so, but you will find people who don't necessarily think that you can do as well as them. There's always going to be someone who thinks, and it has nothing to do with per se sight. They're always
Right.
going to find something they think they can do better than you. Well, don't either learn to accept that they offer something to you, and be willing to, continue to work with them. Or if you think they're going to be that they're bringing your confidence level down, well, then don't surround yourself with people who are going to damage your
Right.
confidence. And if you do feel like you're working on a project where people are like limiting you as a talent because they don't think that you can do certain things, say, well, give me a chance to try. And if they're not willing to give you a chance to try, then you have to make the decision if this is the right project for you. There's projects I've, chosen to not work on. I did have someone said, "Well, I wrote a role for you in this movie, and I want you to do it." And of course, it was a character who was sight impaired, and I was like, "Well, but I don't want to play a script that's
Right.
like specifically pointing out that I'm sight impaired. That's one element of who I am. That's
Hmm.
not, it, you know, should I just wear around? Should I just wear around the t-shirt? So I'm one of the blind ones.
Yep.
Like it's
Right.
not a thing. So, yes, people are going to be resistant, but they're resistant until they realize what you can do. So you have to have confidence in yourself, not ego, but confidence in yourself,
Right.
and be open-minded to what people's suggestions are, as long as it's not counterproductive to what you're trying to do as a director.
Well, before we get off the topic of acting, I have to ask you to repeat what you said before we started this episode about actors always receiving a copy of their work. You remember what I'm talking
Oh, yeah,
about?
I remember. Yeah. So, having worked in independent, media for so long, one of the biggest challenges that faces it, there are so many people who want to make independent films, short films, feature length, whatever the case may be. But one of the things that happens, especially when you're working on those and you're working on what's called in kind, meaning, you're giving your talent, whatever it may be, to the project, and then you're getting to be in this project. They don't pay you. They may give you, food from fast food or whatever. But at the end of the day, if the project never gets to the mainstream, which, you know, 80% of independent projects do not make it to the mainstream world. Some of them don't even ever finish being edited. There's so many of them that get put on the shelf and they never complete the project because they get intimidated once they get into the editing phase. They get intimidated and they may put it on the shelf because they don't know how to edit or whatever else. So what I was sharing earlier was is that if you're an actor, um, or any kind of a notable role, if you're a DP on a project or costuming or whatever, always make sure, and it's a simple thing, and contracts are not a bad thing. Contracts protect you and they protect the other person. So don't look at it as a negative thing. Get them to put something in writing that says that at the completion of this project, within, within, 60 to 90 days, that you will get either a copy of the completed edited project or at least raw footage that you can then use to promote yourself as an actor, not for commercial gain, but to promote yourself as a performer or as a DP or costume designer or whatever else if you're working in that area. So it's something you have for your portfolio, whether it be video or, or still frame, but it's something you have to promote yourself because you've got to have, you know, I could talk all day. Well, I did this and this and this and that. Well, can I see it? Well, I don't know where the director is, and I don't know where the footage is, but I did it. You should just trust me. I was great. you, you get something so you can show people. It's show me. It's show business, as they say. So get something where you can showcase what you've got, and there's nothing wrong with asking for that little contract. That says within 60 to 90 days after the project wraps that I will get a copy of the completed project or raw footage of my work on it so that you know, uh, I can use it to promote myself on a demo reel or whatever else.
Right. Very, very important. Um, yes, and this is yet another one of those things. It's going to take some confidence, because you have to ask for these things, but it's fair. You're not asking for too much. You are putting the work in, so why not be able to use that for your future and put that towards your future? Just, another means of security for yourself. Why not?
Wouldn't you love to
So,
be able to go back and look at something you did 10 years ago and go, "Oh my gosh, I was in
exactly.
that. I'd love to see that." Yeah.
So we're gonna switch gears and wrap up by talking about your podcast. So next month we're actually gonna do an episode entirely on podcasting. You're welcome to join us back to join
Great.
again if you like. But in the meantime, since I mentioned that you're also a podcaster, in addition to everything else that you do, just please share with us, what your podcast is about and sort of why and how you got started doing that.
So there's some that I can't share too much about what I do on them because I do voice work on them and they're anonymous character podcasts. So I do voices for people, and so I can't talk too much about those things. But one of the podcasts that I'm excited about the most that I do is I'm doing a podcast right now. Producing and recording episodes right now for a podcast called Access Today, which is about the world of accessibility. It's about encouraging, telling stories about people who've kind of what we've been talking about here, people who overcome challenges that they face and have succeeded, and also about understanding more about the different types of things that people have challenges with, how they've overcome them, looking at books that have been written by people who have challenges that have overcome, learning more about the conditions, but it'd be macular degeneration or RP or people who have hearing challenges or whatever, and talking about and doing panel discussions as well as one-on-one interviews with doctors or whomever, talking about things, and then trying to push by working with companies and such to try and create a more accessible world for people. Because one of the things that I mentioned previously, we talked about how Sony now has a voiceover feature built into one of their cameras. Well, the
Hmm.
more that you build an accessibility into the world, the more that you offer the more people get to work, and the more people get out there and they can work, the more they become an active member of society. And there's so there's things that I'm really really profoundly concerned about. And I don't want to become a downer in this, but this podcast particularly is very special to me because we have a pretty significant uh, emotional health challenge within people within the disability community. It's
Hmm.
pretty significant, and I want to advocate for people to get more accessibility and to hear stories so they don't feel as much alone in the world. People who've lost their sight, who've newly lost their sight, they may have been 40 years old. That could be very, very difficult for them. I mean, there is so many people I can tell you that I have talked to who said, if I lost my sight at 40, I would be one of those statistics because I could never make it. Well, and that's a very serious concern that happens
It
so
is.
many times.
It does.
And so I want to I want to create a platform where people, realize that yes, those do exist. There are hard times, but there are also good times. You have to look forward to the good times and work hard to become a part of the solution because you can be a part of the solution. One of my favorite songs that I was telling one of the questionnaires that I did for the October the spotlight that they're supposed to be coming out
Right.
is one of my favorite songs ever is a song called Three Wooden Crosses. And one of the lyrics in that song is it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you, but what you leave behind you when you're gone.
Hmm.
And it's all about what did you do to make things better for the people who come after you. I mean, kind of spoiling the whole kind of profile thing, but the thing I talked at one point about how Martin Luther King said that he may not make it to the mountain with the people he was advocating for, but he said that wasn't the point. He just wanted people to get to that mountain and to get,
Right.
for that moment of equality to exist. And accessibility is a form of equality. So if you can create that, then you're leaving that behind for future generations, and that just opens the door more for children and everybody else that comes next.
Exactly. That's so important and it's very necessary. I think it's something that both Shane and I really care about. And honestly, everybody on the Performing Arts Division board, but that's the reason why we do, what we do, is to get the word out and say things are possible. Here are some people who have done it, you know, um, and here are some ideas. And I think that you've been a really great guest for our listeners to be able to hear.
Can I
Um,
ask you a question?
all of the possibilities. Go for it. Because
I
this
want to
is what
ask you.
happens when
So
you interview a podcaster.
yeah. So what? Well, yeah. So what was the? And I think this is just as significant, obviously, for your show, and I'm sure people have heard it before. But what was the reason that you and Shane started the podcast? What is your ultimate that you want to for the listeners to gain from experience with this program?
For sure. I want them to learn. Speaking for myself, I the techniques that are out there that they don't know about. I remember when I was in college, I wanted to take a ballet dance class. It was going to count as the PE requirement because, clearly you need PE in college. I don't know. But I thought it would be cool to take ballet because the school had like one of the top ballet teachers in the world. And of course, like, everything has to be accessible because we have laws about that. And when the accessibilities coordinator went to her and said, well, we have a blind student who wants to take ballet. She said, oh, that's great. Of course, obviously I can't bar her from joining, but who's going to teach her? And I'm thinking to myself, well, you lady, you know what I mean? But then I started to think to myself, and honestly, I'm a really optimistic person. But with other classes and things like that I had going on, I just said, well, you know what? I don't know anything about ballet. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't even know. And that's the thing about it. I'm like, I know a little bit of what it looks like, just, from being, a child and, oh, everyone wants to do ballet, put a little tutu on, whatever. So, I didn't know enough about it to be able to say, this is how I can do it, you know? And I've had several experiences like that throughout my life. And just in that, I said to myself, okay, well, if I could interview either blind people or people who have worked with blind people, whether it be director, whoever, I don't, a professor, I don't care who it is, who can say, yes, this is possible and here's how you do it. I basically would love to cover any topic that relates to the performing arts, until we've covered them all. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just to just keep, making more connections, meeting more people, and getting the word out about how things are done here. And, I've even had people come on and describe their instruments, for people who have never seen a mandolin or a viola or whatever. Because that's something that I do feel like is often taken for granted, is that you'll know what things look like when we don't always know what things look like, you know? So just taking that opportunity to educate people, and it could be something that a student could listen to who is interested in a certain topic related to the performing arts, or even that professor. Instead of saying who's going to teach her, she knows about ballet. She's
Right.
assuming that a blind person can't do ballet, but she knows enough about ballet that if she hears someone talk about it and they start to discuss their adaptive techniques or whatever, alternatives, however they make it accessible, she would then say, oh, that's easy. Why didn't I think of that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus the person who has no idea and, is just trying something out for fun or to fulfill a PE requirement, like may not know, how to make these things accessible. So yeah, it's something that I often regret. I don't have many regrets in life, but I do sort of regret not taking that class. I mean, I took horseback riding instead, which was also something new for me, and it was fun. You know what I mean? And that person also, but her attitude was different. She's like, "I'm glad to have you. I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing, but I love equestrian. I've been riding my whole life, and it was just a completely different experience. She basically just said, "We'll figure this out together." And that's
Well,
that's
so
how I took that. Yeah.
and that's one of the things that's great. So, and I definitely don't want you to look back and go, man, I really wish I should have, pushed more for that ballet instructor. But see, that is the kind of thing that I feel like is pioneering it for the people who come after you. So
Right.
if you had chosen to say, well, I mean, who's going to teach me? Well, that's your job. Maybe
Hmm.
we could work together to try and find a way. Who knows what would have come for the next person who wanted to do it, who was
It's
totally,
true.
you know what I
It's
mean?
true.
You pioneer that path for people, and but you decided to do this podcast ultimately. So, what was the first episode like for you when you first recorded the first podcast episode?
So the first one was Caitlin, and this is more than one question, by the way. But the first episode was Caitlin and Precious and I, and we just had fun. We just had a
Yeah,
blast introducing everyone just to the podcast and what it meant, and why we selected the name Scene Change. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's a moment, often on stage where it could be a fully lighted scene where you see the crew working. It could go completely dark. It could just be that the lights are dimmed. And I felt that was very inclusive to people's different visual acuities or experiences or things like that, just to say that this is for everyone. I don't care if you're totally blind, I don't care if you're fully sighted, everyone can learn something from this. And so, and then not to mention the fact that we are, changing things as far in the performing arts, which often deals with scenes. So, everything from, talking about memories that we've had when we were first starting out and performing and different performance styles performing arts that we do. It was just a blast just to be there and have that discussion. But then I remember doing the ballet episode, and we had a panel of three ballet dancers come on, And I'm pretty sure I shared that exact same story. And it was just really nice to hear exactly how they do things. Some of them were different from, they had different techniques for the same action. We had someone who was totally blind, someone who was, partial, just all at every level. It was just really nice to experience. Um, and then to be able to interview another person who started what's called darkroom ballet, and she's totally blind and she is a professional ballerina. So there's
Hmm.
just, you know what I mean? So just going through all of these different things, interviewing a blind acrobat, interviewing people at a certain point in their career, and then hearing about them, 2, 3 years later, and it's like, wow, they're going on international tours or giving TED Talks or acting or just doing all these different things. Um, when they were already doing really well when I interviewed them, but then to hear them just go even higher, it's just I absolutely love it. And
Oh
to
yeah.
bring them back on the show, so I love doing this. It's so much fun. And I think I think I can speak for Shane and say that he loves it as well because he listens to all these episodes twice at least as he's going through and editing them. So yeah, we have a really great team.
Yeah.
And just, we love what we do.
That's great. No,
Yeah,
there's got to be love in it, right? If there's not love
for
in it, then
sure.
it's like a
For
home
sure.
cooked meal. It's like a home
For
cooked meal.
sure. It goes a long way.
Yeah, it really does.
But this has been, and I say it every time that, this is my favorite episode yet. But honestly, this discussion, and then you totally flipped the format and started interviewing me, which I think is fun. I think we got to do that every now and then. So,
Flip
so
the script once again. Flip the
exactly,
script.
you have to. We have to get the listeners on their toes. So, yeah, thank you
Well, I was waiting
so
for Shane to
much.
come in and talk and say more stuff, but he just likes to
Well,
listen.
people,
And
well,
what?
people yell at us. They're like, he's the producer and he shouldn't talk. So sometimes we get listeners who yell at us when Shane talks.
Really?
So
I think that's awesome when the producer comes in and talks.
every now and then he puts his 2 cents and we get an
Right.
email about it.
Well, my 2 cents will be, come on, more shade, more shade. And it'll be like
More Shane.
Christopher Walken, more cowbell, more cowbell.
That's what I like to hear.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe that's what we'll name this episode. We'll call it Kinsley Martin and More Shane.
You know what that scene change needs is more shade. It just needs more shade in it. No, you're fantastic. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and to hear a little bit more. I obviously have some episodes to catch up on because I have not heard the blind acrobat episode, which I think that's what episode is that? What number is that one?
That's February. I don't remember the number. It's from February. I think it's our first February edition.
First
Okay,
Um,
Valentine's Day,
wow.
yeah, first
February of
Valentine's Day.
21.
All right, go
Yeah. Oh,
back
look
and
at that.
that
Shane's
sounds
on
like
it.
an inch. That sounds like a fat. See, this is why the producer comes in because you go. We did that in February.
Exactly.
Houston, we need an
Exactly.
episode here.
My goodness. So
I'm the
yes,
historian.
exactly. Also the historian. Two roles, dual role. Pay for neither. What was I gonna say? Um, well, okay, let's wrap the show because we gotta go. We're having too much fun here. We're
Yeah,
just really
yeah.
gonna be yelled at this time. But thank you so much, Kingsley. Do you have any social media for the people to follow you? They love to follow. Um,
Yeah, so look on YouTube, youtube.com slash at symbol access today. That's the access today channel for the podcast. And then also, if you want to see random monologues I've done, you can go onto youtube.com slash at monologues, MONOLOGUEZ. Once
I
again,
love that.
taking a little twist of the script. And that's where primarily you're going to see a lot of original monologues, but you will see some playlists that have pre-recorded monologues that I've done in years past. But that's where you can see some of the stuff where I wanted to, put those kind of characters out there that I'd like to play and tell those kinds of stories I'd like to tell.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for joining us today, and to all of our listeners, to Shane and everyone else on the podcast team. This has been another episode of Scene Change with Kinsley Martin and more Shane.
Strike the set.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Joe Schuneman, Precious Perez, Chris Nussbaum, Seyoon Choi, and Aaron Jordan, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.